Welcome back to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We mentioned a lot of young players in that last segment, many of them, majority of them, being forwards. But there is one defenseman who has come up and has been faced with some very difficult challenges in his first 3 games as an NHL player. And he's stood tall for the majority of them, including a game in which he looked very, very good against the Carolina Hurricanes. We're talking about defenseman Jack St. Ivany, who is now getting set to play in his 4th NHL game later this evening if he draws into the lineup. But you look at his first 3 games, it's a pretty intense, docket for Jack St. Ivany at Dallas, at Colorado, at home against Carolina. Some tough challenges. And like you mentioned about Poulin, St. Ivany has not looked out of place at all.
No, he hasn't. And I said this to you beforehand, too. Just, you want to know how I know he hasn't looked out of place? I haven't noticed him. As a third-pairing, defensive-minded defenseman, I haven't seen him make too many mistakes. I've seen him, make some really good plays with the puck, actually. So nothing super egregious to write home about. Nothing super, over the top to write home about. So it's a good start for his position and bringing exactly what he said he could, which is just that steady, shut down defensive mindset. I think I described him to you at least as a early stages Brian Dumoulin, which we'll see how that pans out for him. I mean, that's still very much in the cards because young Dumoulin was a very good defensive defenseman and could play alongside Chris Letang after some time growing. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where Jack St. Ivany goes. Kyle Dubas thinks he can fight for a roster spot next year, and absolutely, he's doing it right now. He's already in and will likely stay in for the time being.
This might hurt people's ears, but him and Ryan Graves looked really good together against Carolina.
The issue is Graves' contract.
Well, Graves' contract is an issue, yes. You don't want to bury a guy. You can't bury a guy on your third pairing for 5 years. That's just not going to happen. The hope there is obviously that Ryan Graves improves. There's a chance he does that. He's not over the hill as far as age is concerned. He's not 25 and under, but he's not 30 and older either. But you looked at those two on Tuesday against Carolina. Again, difficult matchup, a lot of ice time for those two. St. Ivany finished with 15 minutes of ice time and the most that he's faced in his short 3-game span. 2 hits, 1 shot on goal, and him and Graves together, according to Money Puck. Again, fancy stats. 95% of the expected goals, though. That tells you a pretty hefty story. It's not, it's 60%, a little bit more. 95 is pretty drastic. I think that anybody watching that game saw the same thing. And 55% of the shot attempts, not to mention, he had the highest expected goals of any defensive pair, him and Graves together. Higher than, not expected goals comparatively, just expected goals created. More than Erik Karlsson's unit, more than Chris Letang's unit. So again, 1 game sample size. Take it with a grain of salt. But it is nice to see a young player come up and succeed alongside a player that has struggled. But who knows? After whatever happened that took Ryan Graves out of the lineup, I think we all know it, but I don't know who all does. After that, Graves looked good in his first game back. Now, again, you're hoping he builds off of that, but a nice look for St. Ivany and Graves in their first game together.
It helps that here's another pinch of salt to add to your piece too. It helps that Ryan Graves is the one throwing the screen in front of Kochetkov, thank you, on Puljujärvi's goal. It helps
he did all of it. He set up the breakout too, so I'll give him that.
That's true. That's fair. But it helps that Ryan Graves was a blue liner playing in the blue paint for that goal. So that helps with those numbers too. But still, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to have those sort of numbers, because when it comes to defensive pairs, they're not going to score a bunch. So it's hard looking at the counting stats and going, here's how good they are. You're going to need those underlying numbers.
Yep.
I think that's where analytics, at least can be really useful, is knowing what defensive pairs are really good together, what is working defensively and what's not, because it's the only way to track defensive metrics like that, unless you just look at blocks, which even for defensemen can be weird.
Yeah, it can be very weird. And here's the thing. We tout the argument between analytics, hard numbers, eye tests. Use it all. We encourage
Yeah.
you to use it all because it all paints the picture of the story of what happened on the ice. Obviously, it's important to watch the games, and that's why we both watch. Well, you're at every home game, watch every single game. We watch, I think, combined, probably have watched 98% of the Penguins hockey this year. So, like, we might have missed a little bit, but we watch a lot of it. So that always comes into our opinions. Analytics helps tell the story. Hard numbers help tell the story. The storytelling of talking to these players, which Horwat does each and every day, that helps tell the story of where they're at, why they're performing this way. So, that's the last thing we'll say on this one is just we encourage you, look at everything, take everything into account. It might be difficult. That's why we're here. We try to do it. And if you don't like our opinions, because that's all we're doing is giving you our opinions, that's fine. That's why there's a comment section on YouTube, and a lot of you use it, and I love it for it. So that's it for this one. Honestly, before we go, I do want to ask one last thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Jack St. Ivany makes the team out of camp as of right now next season? I know it's a hard because you don't know who's coming in, who's going out. Do you think he has, what % chance do you think he has to make the team out of camp next year?
It's over 50, I'd say, considering the just lack of right shot defenders in the organization. Because you're saying without predicting who may come in, kind of just with what the organization looks like right now. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's no other right shot defenseman that can squeeze into the lineup, and he's honestly a solid choice. If he can really stand out in these next couple of games, it doesn't have to be for the rest of the season. If he can stand out for these next couple on that adrenaline rush and then maybe find a good rhythm after that, yeah, absolutely he can. By the way, for what it's worth too, since we're doing counting stats, Ryan Graves does lead the team in block shots. Throwing that out there.
There it is. Another part of the story. Now, nobody's going to mistake Ryan Graves for having a great season, but, we'll obviously have to discuss a lot of that as the summer goes on. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins, or if you want to listen to us and not look at us because I'm wearing a nice Pirates jersey or it has a beautiful Pirates hat on, so you can check us out on YouTube. That'd be grateful. But if you don't want to look at us, which I understand as well, because, I got a face for radio, I get that. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast from. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.